Watch now as we begin the United States government's version of History of Bioterrorism.
The idea of using disease as a weapon gained a new level of sophistication in the early 1930s as nationally funded research programs on biological warfare were developed. The Japanese had a very active offensive biowarfare research program which included a battalion known as 731. In their program, the Japanese conducted experiments on humans using 15 to 20 different disease-causing agents, with anthrax being one of their favorites. Allied prisoners of war and innocent Manchurian civilians in nearby villages provided an almost endless supply of experimental subjects. When word of Unit 731 leaked to the West, Allied forces began their own programs, concerned that Japan and possibly Germany would gain a military advantage in biowarfare research.
On the third day after exposure, the casualties begin. Dead sheep can be seen further down the line. It is, of course, necessary to confirm that they've died of anthrax.
In 1942, on Greniard Island off the coast of Scotland, the British conducted their first scientifically controlled biowarfare field trials. Scientists exploded anthrax bombs near immobilized sheep to determine if the spores would survive an explosion and retain the ability to infect anyone nearby. Test results showed that anthrax could in fact be effectively dispersed by explosive devices and could also remain viable in the soil for decades. This brought home the realization that if an anthrax bomb were dropped on a city like London, the results could have been catastrophic. Greniard Island was declared off-limits until it was decontaminated in the 1980s. It's now safe for both humans and animals. Like our allies, the United States responded to the perceived threats from Germany and Japan. In 1943, we began an offensive biological program with a modest research and development facility at Camp Detrick, which is now Fort Detrick, Maryland. By the end of the program, we had weaponized a total of 7 incapacitating or lethal human agents, including anthrax. In 1969, Richard Nixon renounced the use of biological weapons for the United States.
Now here is Dr. Joanne Kahn-Oh from the U.S. Centers for Disease Control, providing several half-truths and even complete lies. The most amazing thing of all is she doesn't even know she is dispensing deception as a propagandist. How is this possible? It's the same for most of the doctors and health officials you are about to meet. First of all, this doctor was selected to perform as a pleasant-looking, obviously intelligent, expertly trained, trustworthy physician, getting paid to read a script. You can assume that while she thinks she is serving the best interests of our nation, all she really knows is what was given to her to read from a script on the left side of her camera. If she was really an expert, not simply made to look like one, she would know after critically reviewing textbooks, congressional records, and several history books on biological warfare that some of her dates are off and all of her information is misleading. Before I evidence these facts, allow me to provide some commentary on how it is possible that Dr. Kahn-Oh's participation in this C2W PSYOPs could be effected without her even knowing it. Many of you have seen or heard about the movie The Manchurian Candidate.
This is rich people, Manchurian Global, funding bad science.
Raymond Shaw is probably the
Kindest, bravest human being I've ever known.
Hypnotized government assassins who, like Dr. Kahn-Oh here, had no idea they were being used to kill. They are mind-controlled and behaviorally engineered to serve unwittingly military agendas and CIA programs. Medical education relies on many of the same training methods. Medical schools conduct a virtual hazing process they call professional training. After prolonged, intense studies and life and health jeopardizing clinical exposures, medical residents are deprived of sleep, sometimes for days. This form of high-stress, trauma-based education is completely consistent with standardized techniques used in mind control and cult indoctrination programs. This is commonly called brainwashing, but it is really a subtle form of hypnosis that relies on fear and trauma to capture and control your attention and shape your behavior. The end result is you get a heavily trained, egocentric professional that earnestly believes they are operating for the public's greatest good and arrogantly defends their actions based on the limited and limiting science that they have learned. Many people are offended by this egoist attitude in medicine, but few realize it is rooted in the same German psychiatry that proclaimed at the gates of Auschwitz that work makes you free. Unlike most cult followers, however, who know who their leaders are, Dr. Kano here has no idea she is mostly serving the Rockefeller family. She probably never learned that the Nazi Party partnered Rockefellers monopolized American medicine and public health by the early 1930s. This not-so-gentle redirection of American medicine was largely due to the prostitution of Abraham Flexner, cited by Time magazine as the autocrat of the moneybags. In 1940, Flexner operated for the Carnegie and Rockefeller Foundation's fortunes to extend their medical monopoly. Naturally, these changes in healthcare were said by these profiteers to be in the best interest of public health. But they insisted in quashing all medical competition in the natural healing arts and sciences, including the professions of chiropractic, natural medicine, herbology, homeopathy, acupuncture, massage, essential oils, and most forms of energy medicine. These wealthy industrialists politically contrived their exclusive control over medical education. They exclusively emphasized the most profitable approaches to healthcare. They funded only students, faculty, and academic institutions that served their needs for drug sales and profitability. This is how the pharmaceutical industry assumed its awesome control over healthcare and our lives. Dr. Kano makes other nations, including the Japanese, appear evil for their human rights violations, using Allied prisoners of war and Mongolians for biological weapons experiments. But even a superficial review of history books and medical journals shows America's entities did the same or even worse.
Funding for the Health Century has been provided by these partners in discovery, who have joined together to mark the centennial of the National Institutes of Health and America's unique partnership of government, academia, and industry for the advancement of biomedical research.
Are these Anglo-American corporations any less criminal than the Japanese military organizations Dr. Kano recalls? And her date is off. It was 1941, according to this text of the United States Congressional Record, that America's biological weapons program began under the direction of George W. Merck, president of the German drug giant, the Merck Pharmaceutical Company.